The AP poll dropped on Sunday. The top 10 looks like this. Oregon, still number 1. Texas, number 2. Penn State, number 3. Number 4, Notre Dame. Number 5, Georgia. Number 6, Tennessee. Ohio State drops to 7. SMU at 8. Indiana at 9. Boise State at 10. Ohio State only falls to number 7. How far do they fall in your 134 rankings, Chris?
I've got Ohio State down to number 6. And I don't understand how Ohio State should fall behind Tennessee, which is what they did in the AP poll. I don't, because I think the resumes aren't even close. Like, if you take out Tennessee has a loss to Arkansas, Ohio State has a loss to Michigan. Say those cancel each other out. They're essentially the same thing kind of. Ohio State still has 2 top 10 wins. You beat Penn State, you beat Indiana, and you played a 1-point game with the number 1 team on the road. All that Tennessee has after that is a win against Alabama. Like, in what world should Tennessee be ahead of Ohio State? Like, that feels like recency bias because of what we just saw. It is recency bias.
I think it'll be interesting to see how the committee handles it. It's a pretty compelling case. I do think Ohio State will be lower than Tennessee in the rankings, in the CFP rankings. But I think it's a fair point that if you're... The problem is that Ohio State fans are so furious that they're too busy yelling about Ryan Day to even want to make that case. Like, they're like, I don't even care. Ryan Day sucks. I don't want, who cares where Tennessee's ranked? But you're not wrong.
And it's a big case because we're going to get to the bracket in a moment.
Yeah, yes. It's a pretty big deal.
Where Tennessee and Ohio State are could be determined who plays where against the other one.
Chris, I do have a question for you. And remember, Joey McGuire might be listening. You good with Boise at 10 ahead of Arizona State at 12?
So, yes, I have Boise State at number 10. I have Arizona State at number 12.
Mm-hmm.
It's tough. Boise State, the last several weeks, was not playing very well.
They have not played well since they barely beat UNLV. They have been kind of limping around since then.
So on my long drive to College Station on Friday, I played the entire Boise-Oregon State game on my phone. Listened to that on the whole drive down. Boise State played pretty well in that game. Like, they dominated Oregon State in a way that you want to see them. Ashton Genty over 200 yards. So I'm good with Boise State there. But I forgot who it was. It might have been an AD or a coach or somewhere. Made a very fair case. When Arizona State played Wyoming, Arizona State won 48-7. When Boise State played Wyoming, Boise State won 17-13. It was a very close game. They had to come back and beat Wyoming in a game that Arizona State did not have trouble with. So if you're putting Arizona State and Boise State on the same tier, it's a fair case with the common opponent situation. I'm just not putting them on the same tier just yet. Boise State still 11-1. You have the 1-point loss to Oregon.
Mm-hmm.
You've got some wins that are all right in there. I've got Boise State still ahead of Arizona State for right now. Plus, if Boise State beats UNLV in the Mountain West Championship game, which is a play-in game for the playoff, that will be a top 25 win. It'll be a second top 25-ish win over a team that's in the top 25 in UNLV. So,
ironically,
that's
they should not beat them
to
too badly, because if you beat them super bad, they might fall out of the top 25. Like, that's a real thing. I'm half joking, but I'm also serious.
Yeah.
So anyway,
so back to that Tennessee Ohio State mix, and here's why it matters. Because here's what the playoff bracket would look like based on the AP poll. It would be number 1 seed Oregon State playing the winner of 8 seed Tennessee versus 9 seed Ohio State. Their position matters because that means Tennessee would be hosting Ohio State. I think it should be the other way around, but that's me. It would also have the number 2 seed Texas against number 7 seed Georgia or 10 seed Indiana. The 3 seed would be SMU playing the winner of 6 seed Notre Dame or 11 seed Alabama. And then the 4 seed Boise State getting a bye and playing the winner of number 5 seed Penn State, number 12 seed Arizona State.
Let's start there, Chris. Do we think that you mentioned that this Ohio State-Tennessee debate is probably going to be the cut line for whether or not you host? Now, there might still be some upsets in championship week. There might still be some movers and shakers, and maybe it doesn't matter. But here's another question, and we don't have a precedent for this, Chris. But I mentioned last week that when you talked about how you handle conference championship game losers, there was always an influence in the bowl system that, hey, we want to sell tickets, we want to do these things. We don't want to get a team that just came off a loss where the fans are very apathetic. Well, you kind of have a unique situation here, where if you have a scene in Columbus, I don't know that that's going to be like the best of college football. Whereas like Knoxville, people
wait. Are you saying the committee would not put Ohio State at home because fans are mad at Ryan
I'm not saying they'll do it. I'm just saying it might be something that some people might think about if you're trying to get full stadiums and you're trying to get a seat. I think Ohio State fans would probably not respond well at this moment to trying to back Ryan Day in a big game in Columbus in the playoff. I'm just telling you. I think people are kind of dumb.
Because it's Tennessee. It's a playoff game. It's like there's no better way to move past Michigan to be like, hey, we've got another important game to play. That's the thing. Remember when
if
they
people
lost
are
that
just convinced they're going to lose, which I think a lot of Ohio State fans would be like, oh, Tennessee, we can't handle their line. We're just going to lose. Their defensive line's going to eat us up. I think you would have an issue with.
I do not think Ohio State fears Tennessee whatsoever. Ohio
It's
State
not a
fans
fear
are absolutely
thing. I
not
think it's
fearing
just that I don't
Tennessee.
think Ryan Day can do it. I'm not excited about this. I'm not saying it'll be a factor. I'm just saying I think
You're
it'd
just
be
throwing out a
interesting.
crazy conspiracy. Like that's a wilder conspiracy almost than
It's
like
not a
ESPN
it's
put
not
the
a
SEC
conspiracy.
in over the ACC.
It's not a conspiracy
That's 100%
theory.
a
It's just something I
conspiracy.
want. It's just something I wonder if anybody's thinking about.
You're saying the committee's making a seeding decision based on home games. That's conspiracy. Like
It's not a conspiracy. That's not a conspiracy.
Yes, it is, because that's not what it's supposed to be. And if it is, I would file like a lawsuit or something if I was Ohio State if you cost me because of that. I'm just saying, like,
My point is it's very close between those two. I think that is probably going
I
to be
don't
the
think
cut
it's
line.
close. That's the thing. I don't think it should be close.
Well, it doesn't matter
Look
what
at
you
Ohio
think it's
State's
going
resume.
to be close.
Look at Ohio State's resume. Look at Tennessee's resume. It's not even close. Ohio State has 2 top 10 wins and a 1-point loss to the number 1 team in the country. Tennessee beat Alabama, and like that's pretty
Florida.
much it. Like they some lower level like South Carolina, lower level SEC teams. Like there's not much there. If Tennessee gets to host over Ohio State fans should be really mad. Then you can start saying ESPN SEC bias and blah 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 and all these things that Big Ten fans are want to do. But that's going to be. The thing is, like, a lot of this could get locked in. We don't know what's going to happen with conference championship game losers. Like, Oregon and Penn State should probably stay ahead of both those teams. Notre Dame's not playing in one. Texas, Georgia, probably both going to stay ahead of Ohio State and Tennessee as well. Like, that top half may be already locked in, depending on what the committee's going to do with these conference championship games. The biggest concern is at the very end, which is if Clemson beats SMU, then you've got a debate around basically Alabama,
Versus
Miami,
and SMU.
South Carolina, SMU. So like when we went to the 12-team playoff, a lot of the thought was like, hey, there's going to be a team that's really hot at the end of the season, and you're not going to want to play them come playoff time, and they're going to get in. South Carolina like is that team, and if they weren't directly behind 2 teams they lost to, I'd say yeah, like they're right there. But I personally don't think they can be. Now the AP put them ahead of Ole Miss, who spanked him in Columbia. That's what I don't
we
get.
glossed over the fact that Ole Miss didn't beat South Carolina. They won 27-3 in South Carolina. This is why they're ahead of them.
No, South Carolina's ahead of Ole Miss.
That's what I mean.
In the AP
that's what I'm
poll.
saying.
That's why it's
I'm talking about
weird.
in the
Alabama was
pecking
close
order.
game.
In the pecking order for the playoff. And so you look at it, okay, after Saturday's win, South Carolina has 3 top 25 wins. Ole Miss has 1, but it is Georgia. That matters, I think, to some people. It's close. But I think when it's that head-to-head, man, that's going to be tough. If you have the same record, and yes, South Carolina's resume is better, I think it'll be tight. I just don't think either of these teams are going to get in the conversation. You're going to need all kinds of hell to break loose in conference championship week, and there's just not that many possibilities to get them into the conversation. I think it is going to come down to Alabama against Miami. If SMU loses, SMU probably gets thrown into that mix. Again, I've said this 6 weeks ago. I think it's true. You don't want to get to the end of this conversation in the playoff and have your team compared to Alabama because the eye test is very powerful, and Alabama is Alabama, and they haven't looked good. But at the end of the day, that personnel, looking at them on the lines, they're a relatively balanced team. I think SMU and Miami could give Bama a game that could definitely beat them. But when you talk about hypotheticals, you know, we joked about it a couple weeks ago, Chris, but it's true. The SEC's never lost a hypothetical game. The perception of these things matters, and when you're talking about teams that don't have a lot in common, like Alabama and Miami and SMU, I think Alabama wins that debate. You can talk about whether or not it's fair, and I think that's a fair debate, but Alabama's winning that debate. They're going to get in ahead of those teams.